Well, all right, guys, it's 12 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And we have a great training planned, and I can't wait to have you guys hear from Julie today. And during today's training event, we have the honor of hearing from Julie Baumgardner as she shares the leadership principles behind becoming the voice for marriage in your community. And I know that this is going to be so helpful for all of us. But before we get started, I do want to let you know that this session is being recorded and it will be shared with each of you in my follow-up email. So be on the lookout for that email next week. And we always like to begin with prayer. And I want to introduce you to Curt Hamner. Curt is one of our newest additions to the CMI family. Curt and his wife, Rhonda, along with a great team of people, lead the Central Coast Marriage Collective. And it is one of the newest CMIs located in Central California. So Curt, whenever you are ready.
Great. Thanks, Steph. Hey, I'm not going to say anything at all about the weather. So we'll just go straight to prayer. So let's pray together. Father, we're so grateful for this collection of people that you would call your family, that you would call the body of Christ, as we gather together with the intent and the purpose of changing the culture of marriage in this country and around the world. So, Father, I'm grateful for these people. I'm grateful for Steph and her team, for the way that she pulls us together on a regular basis, for Julie, where and how you have used her over the years, and for the gifts that she brings to share with us this morning. Grateful for that. So we would just ask that you would go before us, that you would prompt with your Holy Spirit, you would prompt our hearts and our minds, that you would take our intellect and our vision and stretch that by the things that Julie shares with us and we share with each other today. We ask these things in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you so much for praying, Curt. Well, It is truly an honor to introduce our speaker, Julie Baumgardner. And in case you don't know Julie has a deep passion for helping create healthy, vibrant marriage relationships. With over 35 years of experience, Julie's journey has taken her from counseling teens and at-risk couples to speaking on a national and international stages. Julie co-founded First Things First, a nonprofit dedicated to strengthening marriages and families. And under her leadership as president and CEO for 19 years, First Things First became the national resource for marriage and family. Julie was also the senior director of WinShape Marriage, where she worked with an energetic team to create experiences, retreats, and resources that support couples in every stage of marriage and help them grow in their relationship with each other and with God. She's been married to Jay since 1989, and Julie and Jay live in Rome, Georgia, with their sassy English cream golden retriever, Eloise. And they have a daughter, Ashley, who is married to Keith. And I just want to tell you, I love listening to Julie speak. You guys are in for a treat today. She has so much wisdom to share, and I think that I have listened to everything she has available on YouTube. I just love listening and hearing her speak. So I'm really looking forward to today. So without further ado, Julie, it's an honor to hear from you today. And I do want to just say that if you guys have questions, Julie is fine with you asking those questions at any point during the presentation. You don't have to wait until the end. We will have an opportunity at the end where we open up for Q&A, but if something pops into your mind that you want to ask along the way, feel free to do so. So Julie, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Before Julie starts, I just want to introduce the guy that's sitting next to me.
I was going to say.
He heard that Julie was going to be the presenter today, so he had to stop by, and he's just doing a drive-by to say hello to Julie.
Say hello to Julie. You guys, y'all know that Dennis needs adult supervision, so I had to drop by Panama City. You know, Sandy has me check in, Elizabeth, to make sure he's got adult supervision. Julie, you're a rock star.
Elizabeth is here as well.
Hey. We're just saying hello on our way over. Take it away,
right.
Julie.
Good to see you
You're
guys.
awesome.
You're gonna love it.
Oh, goodness. I am so excited to be with you all. I see several familiar faces and also some new faces. And when I was talking with Steph earlier, I said, I know there's nothing new under the sun. And so I'm going to speak from what I know and what I've experienced, but I also know that there are a lot of people on this call who have a lot of experience as well. So if you have something to add to anything that I say, please feel free to jump in. I would love for you to do that. For those of you who don't know kind of where I started out with this community marriage initiative piece, I actually was working in corporate America when I heard that they were going to, some businessmen in our community in Chattanooga were going to start a prevention-oriented initiative dedicated to strengthening marriages and families. And as a counselor, I was all about that. And as someone who had experienced my own parents' divorce and then my father just kind of leaving my world, I was very taken with the idea that we could actually do something community wide that would help people build strong marriages and families. That was in 1997. And I can tell you that back then, people weren't really saying the marriage word. And people thought we were crazy. I can remember Chuck Colson came in for our very first fundraiser and he spoke to community leaders the next morning for a breakfast. And I think 15 or 20 years later, I ran into the executive director of the Colson Center and we were talking and he said, yeah, Chuck came back from that and he said, it'll never work. That'll never succeed. And First Things First is going great guns today, doing really well, and still working as a community initiative that is seeking to strengthen families and help fathers be involved in the lives of their children. So that excites me. But when I think about being the voice of marriage in your community and what leadership principles I would lay before you as things that I think we all need to consider. I think that the very first thing that I would say to you is, I think as leaders, we need to pay attention to how we communicate with people. And I say that just based on conversations that I had early on at First Things First and conversations that I continue to have today. I can remember having conversation with some couples who are, I would say, next gen folks coming along behind us. And one of the things they said is, we know marriage is hard. Stop telling us marriage is hard. Help us understand, how do we do this and flourish? And I thought, okay, that's a really good word for those of us who are leading, because so often we're like, hey, marriage is hard. And you need to get that and then figure it out. And so with communication, I would say in terms of leading out, we need to think through, how are we educating our community and how are we talking about marriage? Because I think one of the things I noticed when we were launching, and I still think it's true today, it's easy to stick with people who are fairly similar to us and agree with us on what we're trying to do, versus actually really getting out of our silo or our comfort zone and having conversations with people throughout the community. And I don't mean asking them to come to you. I mean us as leaders going to them. So getting out and having the conversation. And what I find, and this will be shocking to you, what I find is that it really is all about relationship. And as leaders, what we're really trying to do, like the biggest principle here, is establishing trust and relationship, so that even if I don't agree with you on everything, we have sat across from each other and we have had conversation in such a way that you know my intentions are pure, and I know you and I know your intentions. And in doing that, I I just can tell you there were places that as leaders we were invited into for roundtable discussion or to be a part of a task force or to be a part of a commission that I don't think we would have been offered that opportunity had we not been diligent and very intentional about going and sitting down with people that we knew were different than us. And when I say getting out there, I mean in all of the different facets of the community, in healthcare, in corporate America, in the churches, which I think is the obvious one that we go to first, in the schools, really running the gamut of all of the different segments in the community and becoming a trusted voice. Because I think people won't listen until they really know, oh, okay, this person can be trusted. And I think something that comes along with that in terms of a leadership principle is really being well versed, knowing your stuff, and making sure that people understand I'm not sharing my opinion with you, because that's what we see a lot of today is people sharing their opinion versus they'll say, I believe, well, I think. And for us, it would behoove us to make sure that as we're talking about the impact of marriage on a couple, on children, on a community, in schools, across the board, when we can actually say, what I'm sharing with you is not my opinion. This is research based, and I'm giving you a host of things that we know to be true based on research, and not just one research project, but multiple research projects. And so I think that matters. And I also think that as we share, it is tempting to want to tell everybody everything that we know. And I think what I've learned through the years leading out and trying to figure out how do I become a trusted voice? I want to leave them wanting more. So I'll give them information and the things that I think are most pertinent to what they're dealing with. And then I'll leave them wanting more so that they'll come back and ask, oh, well, what do you think about this? Brooke, I saw that you have a question, but I can't see the question. So do you want to unmute yourself and just ask the question?
I was just wondering where you recommend like finding statistics so that, where could we go to say like what should we be looking for? I'm newer to this than I know a lot of the people are.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The Healthy Marriage Resource Center, I was actually just on there today because I wanted to kind of see what do they have. They have a lot of statistics. Carl, Dennis, Richard, all have a lot of statistics and reports, and we could, I mean, I have a lot of things that we could actually post along with this stuff if you want to do that for people to be able to reference. There's
That
some
would be great.
fantastic
That would be
studies.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. One thing that there's a book that came out last year called The Two-Parent Privilege, and that has some excellent information in it. And that would be one thing that I would say to you is yes, we are operating from a faith-based perspective, and we also need to make sure that we have valid, credible research that we can tell people about. Because when we launched First Things First, I actually thought it was a given that people would know how important marriage is, because I had heard so many people talking about the importance of strong marriages. But when we launched, I was actually shocked at the lack of information that was out there. And now, oh my goodness, from 1997 to now, there's so many really great resources. Brad Wilcox's book, Get Married, is excellent. And if you're not subscribed to the Institute for Family Studies blog, he sends out great information on a weekly basis. We could probably compile all kinds of really good resources for everybody to pay attention to. Certainly, NARMI has great information, and there are other resources out there to pay attention to. So, and Amy says she set up Google Alerts for different resources. So that's a great way to do it too. I would just say to you, be sure you're quoting credible sources, because there is stuff out there that isn't credible. And we want to make sure that what we are sharing with people is credible research, which there's plenty of that. The other thing I would tell you as a leader is that we need to be creative. And when I say creative, I mean how we deliver a message really matters, and paying attention to the hot topics of the day. What is spinning out there that we could actually take and utilize to present a message on the importance of marriage, and people not feel like we're banging them over the head with it, but that we create an atmosphere of, man, I want that. I really want to know how to, I want to know how to get that. And you make it sound plausible, like I could actually get there. I could learn how to do that. So those I think are very important. Educating, creating awareness and understanding, and put yourself out there. So I take advantage of every opportunity that you have to be able to speak in the community, at civic organizations and other places, because as you do that and you share research-based information, you are establishing yourself as an expert and as a credible resource, so that when people have questions about healthy relationship, what does it look like to flourish and to thrive, and how do people actually get there, you are the person that they automatically think of. Oh, I should call them. They could probably help us, or they could probably steer us to a good resource. Those things are incredibly important. And I've had some people say to me, as they lead out at a community initiative, I'm not a great speaker. And my response to that is, just like we can teach people the skills in terms of how to have a healthy, flourishing, thriving marriage, you can learn to be a good speaker. So there's Toastmasters, you can watch TED Talks. I pay attention to the speakers that are really good speakers. I'm always paying attention. I think I'm a lifelong learner. So even still today, I am paying attention to what people are doing on stage, and I am incorporating that into what I am doing. So even if you don't feel like you're great at speaking now, you can be. And I would encourage you to take that on so that you can get out there and speak on behalf of the Community Marriage Initiative. And more people will ask you, because the evil one would lead you to believe nobody's interested. This is far too big, and you're only one person. It's kind of like the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy in John 10:10. I believe we've been called to something that is far bigger than who we are as individuals. And our opportunity is to trust the Lord to lead us in this process, really to lean into Him and help us understand, just one step at a time. What's the next step? Where are you asking me to join you in your work? And what are you calling me to do next? It's easy to be intimidated and just think, this is just so big that I don't think I can do it. And as leaders, a leadership principle is like to do the next best thing when it comes to helping people to have healthy marriages in your community. I also think that as leaders, an important principle to think about is that we are agents of change. And people have heard so many myths about marriage. And our opportunity is to very consistently speak truth, very consistently speak to what we know, and not be afraid to sing a different tune, if you will, than some of the other people out there. And I think that that can also be somewhat intimidating to feel like you are a lone voice out there. But I can tell you, in 1997, we were for sure lone voices in Chattanooga. And what I find is, even though it can feel lonely, my experience consistently through the years is people want relationship. You know, we have this epidemic of loneliness. People want relationship. There's a lot of barriers to that in terms of how children are raised today in isolation, playing games on screens, and not having face-to-face interaction with people. And we have the opportunity to be an agent of change and help them to see you can learn. You might be awkward now, but you can learn. And so I also think that that's a voice of hope. And as a leader, a leadership principle for me is not to be unrealistic, but to be realistic about, you know what, there is hope. There's absolutely hope. There's hope for you. There's hope for me. And we're all on this journey together. And that's another principle that I would ask you to consider. The more that we can help people see, I'm 36 years into marriage. I am a child of divorce, and I'm on a journey, and I am seeking to do this journey well, and that takes intentionality every single day. So I don't think I've got it all figured out. I am seeking every day to try and cultivate an environment in our marriage where we can thrive and be God honoring together. So that, I think that resonates with people a lot, because it is intimidating when I had people tell me all the time, well, these people that are on the stage who are speaking about marriage, they just seem to have it all together, and we don't have it all together. And I just don't even know if we can get it all together. And for me, I realized, okay, as leaders, we need to be willing to be transparent enough to talk about our own struggles and the fact that we're still on the journey. We're still learning, and we're still growing. So I'm going to stop for just a second, because I can't see the chat, but I can see that there's a lot of comments in the chat. So does anybody have anything that they want to add, or any questions at this point?
Friends of the family ask, how does one determine credibility of a source?
That's a great question. So I would tell you, the people who are out there doing really great research. So Brad Wilcox is doing great research. Alan Hawkins, Scott Stanley, Howard Markman. Gottman Institute has a lot of interesting and great research. I would just tell you that there are things that they push out that I pay attention to, because John Gottman has been doing this work for a very long time. And there are some things that I'm probably not going to push out, and other things that there's no doubt that what they're talking about, what Scott and Howard are talking about, and what others have put out there, they all line up. And that's what I'm paying attention to. If I have questions, I call my friends. I'll pick up the phone and call Dennis Stoika, or I'll call Richard, or I'll call Curt and others, Scott Stanley, and just say, hey, what do you know about this research? Because I want to make sure that what I'm telling people is credible. And I'm learning to be discerning. And through my 30 years, I'll read something and I'll be like, okay, that doesn't line up with what I have seen come out of the gurus. And if it doesn't line up, then I'm paying attention. So Judith Wallerstein's work on the unexpected legacy of divorce, outstanding and absolutely still worth paying attention to and knowing. The Case for Marriage, even though it was written in 2000, it's so interesting to me watching Melissa Kearney and her book on the two-parent privilege. So much of what Linda Waite and Maggie wrote about in 2000 absolutely applicable in 2024 and 2025. And so I would just tell you to pay attention to what the scholars, the marriage gurus that are out there are saying about marriage. And if you see something that doesn't line up with that, it doesn't mean that it isn't credible. I'm just saying, ask questions, because that's how we lead well, is that we are critical thinkers and we're asking questions to make sure that what we're getting ready to say to people is accurate to the very best of our knowledge. And there's boatloads of research that Brad Wilcox has put out, and he cites in his book Get Married, as well as what Scott Stanley and Howard Markman and so many others. Family Wellness, plenty of others are doing the work out there. Does anybody, Dennis, do you want to add anything to that, or anybody else who's been doing this for a long time?
No, I love what you said. Second everything you've said.
Awesome. Okay. Anybody else? All right. So I think that some other things that I would ask you to think about beyond being an agent of change, being willing to do things differently, creating an opportunity to have communication with you and establishing yourself as the expert, is to activate. I mean, I think as leaders, sometimes we push information out to people, but we don't tell them, here's what you can do. And what I have picked up on is if I can help people, they'll say to me, no, I'm not the expert. I'm like, you don't have to be the expert. You just have to be willing to do something. And so when we launched First Things First, we actually created a page of 10 things you can do to help build a community where marriages flourish. And I would say today, I would still do that. I would tell people, hey, host a small group in your home. I was having a conversation with our daughter, and she said, yeah, we have a marriage small group through our church, but they also have a whole bunch of families on their street that they do life with. And they've all got kids except for Ashley and Keith. And so they're all, they're just all in the thick of it, of having jobs, raising children, all the things. And she said, yeah, Keith, they all come over here and they throw darts in the garage, and Keith has informal small group with them. And I love it because he's imparting marriage wisdom that he's learning in their small group to this group of guys. But nobody has said, hey, this is a small group and I'm going to impart marriage information. Brilliant. And that's the kind of thing that I think we need more of. So yes, you can be super intentional and say, hey, we're going to start a small group and we'd love to invite you to come, and we're just going to do life together. Or you can do what Keith is doing and have dart throwing in your garage and still impart marriage wisdom as you're on the journey. In addition to that, I just think having conversations, it seems like churches are the logical place for marriage strengthening to take place. And yet, it is often the place where people tell me, I feel like I'm banging my head against a brick wall. I can't get them to move off of center. And I can tell you that that was the case in 1997. And while we've seen some movement with churches doing things, which has been glorious, I think going to the people in the church. Sometimes if the church won't actually appoint someone to actually lead a marriage ministry, getting people within the church excited and understanding, hey, this is actually how it happens anyway, is grassroots, one-on-one, couple to couple, relationship to relationship, and empowering people to do that. Find a good book and study it together. Do some activities together. Walk over to somebody who's newly married and just ask them, hey, would you like to come over for dinner? And be encouraging to them. Practical things that we can tell people to do will actually light the fire in our community faster than feeling like we have to lead the charge and make everything happen. So I do think there are a lot of people who are very interested in coming alongside others. I had an older couple tell me, I'm just waiting for somebody to ask me. And I'm like, don't wait for somebody to ask you. Pay attention to who needs encouragement and go have a conversation with them. The other thing I will also say about practical tools and practical things to do in your community, if you have friends who are leading organizations in the C-suite at companies, and they are believers, talking to them about how can I be helpful to you in terms of helping people to have healthy relationships for the people that you shepherd, because these CEOs of these companies are shepherding a lot of people and can have impact in a lot of homes. And we all know that the skills that we're teaching for healthy marriage are the skills for healthy relationships across the board. And so if I can teach them to you at work and say to you, hey, these are transportable to home, I can impact marriages and perhaps even get people to understand, hey, come to this church where we're doing a special thing on marriage. So laying out for people very specifically ways that you can be intentional about helping marriages to thrive in our community creates a groundswell, a group effort that's grassroots, if you will. And I know that there's people on this call who've been doing this for a very long time, and sometimes it gets disheartening. I mean, truth be told, it just feels disheartening. Like, okay, are we the only ones who think this? Are we the only ones who see this? And I would just say part of being a leader is sticking with what this is a calling. And what we know to be true is that across the board, adults do better, children do better, communities do better, states do better, the nation does better when people are in healthy, flourishing, thriving marriages. And so to keep on keeping on is part of it. And I've had people come back to me years later who were like, you don't remember me, but I came to premarital when you taught it, and we've been married for 30 years. And, it hadn't been perfect, but we're hanging right in there. And I'm like, that is what it's all about. So I'm going to stop here for just a minute and see if people have comments or questions that they want to add to this discussion. Steph, I keep seeing things come up in the chat, but I cannot see them.
John is sharing links of things that you have already shared. Like
Okay, great.
he shared the link to let's see. He shared the link with Brooke for the things that you had shared with her.
Okay, great. Great.
to
I
let's see.
apologize, Julie. I thought I was just sharing that with Brooke. I didn't think I was sharing that with everybody.
Hey, that's great. No, I think everybody can use it, so that's good. Bruce, what's your question?
Well, it's really not a question. I just wanted to comment. I just had Weekend to Remember Family Life did here in Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Yeah.
and there were 400 couples there. And out of that, there were 60 couples that were interested in learning how to facilitate small groups. So these people are out there. We need to find them, and like you said, drive it from a grassroots level inside churches that oftentimes are like a big super tanker that can't change direction
Yeah.
on a dime.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes them a long time to get around to it. So all of those couples, that's wonderful. And I think too, knowing things like Grace Marriage and other resources where people can play a video and then have some discussion and feel confident enough, like, okay, I can do this, and I don't necessarily have to be the expert. I can just put this out there, and then we can share information about it. And that is how I can help contribute to helping people have strong, healthy marriages. So, and there are plenty of really great books that you could do book studies with. People could, read and then have discussion around. We've done a lot of that with Gary Chapman's material, The Wholehearted Marriage. Greg Smalley's got a lot of really good content that lends itself to small group discussion. So, I think I was talking with, I don't remember who, I guess it was John Conger. I was talking with this book, Let's Have Lunch Together. It's really all about relationships. And that book in and of itself is about how to fundraise. But what I love about the book is that the principle Marshall talks about is everything that we are doing boils down to taking the time to create relationship with people. Whether it's at the Chamber of Commerce or Rotary or Kiwanis or at the church or at the corporation down the street. It is truly about taking the time to develop relationship. And in doing that, then asking for help from them, to help spread the word, to be a part of a solution for a really big problem that is creating poverty and loneliness and children showing up to school not ready to learn. So many issues with anxiety and depression, both in adults and children. And most people, when you have the conversation with them about being part of a solution to a really big problem, people want to do that because they can usually relate to it personally or it's close to them. And so I often think we get intimidated by, I don't know anybody who has a lot of money. I don't really know any of the community leaders. And I would just say, my gut is, people who do. And when you start to have the conversations and start expressing, this is the need, do you know anybody that could help me? You might be absolutely shocked at how far you can go in terms of putting information in front of people. And when you do get the opportunity to put information in front of people, making sure that the information is very relevant to who they are, like it speaks to them in their role, that, hey, did you know that children who come from two-parent families are much more likely to show up to school ready to learn at kindergarten, which also translates into reading on grade level in third grade, which also translates to what they're thinking about when it comes to prisons in the future for children who are not reading on grade level. So much information that's out there that we can give to people to help them, help all of us become healthier as a community. Amy, I saw that you posted something, but I didn't see what it was.
She said, what was the one org you've been a part of that was maybe out of the ordinary that created some of the most meaningful relationships for you?
Great question. I was actually part of a out of wedlock task force. And the whole conversation was, how do we help these moms? And there really wasn't any conversation around prevention of, well, okay, we do need to talk about how we help these moms. But maybe a bigger question is, how do we actually prevent this? Which there have been great strides in that area, but man, when we came to the table for that, I would say there were people who had very differing opinions about, well, what are you talking about prevention? We don't need to really, we don't need to force values on people. I'm like, I'm not talking about forcing values on people. I'm more talking about educating people about thinking through, what does this mean for you? What would this mean for a child? And so it was one of those situations where we chose to stay at the table to work on the 80%, and we agreed to disagree on the 20%. And I think sometimes you can feel like, okay, well, we do not agree here, so I don't need to be at this table. But yet, I think, if you only hear yourself in an echo chamber, that's not helpful. And it's hard to teach people to be critical thinkers when they don't have all the information. So I would say that that's been one. And certainly being able to be out there with Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce, I very intentionally was a part of Leadership Chattanooga, and I became the chair of the curriculum committee in order to, yes, make sure that we covered all the bases, but for sure, when it comes to what does thriving family, thriving marriage, what's the impact on a community and poverty? Boy, that was life-changing for people. So, Ray?
So I had a question related to the conversation we had about how do we trust sources, and it's more of a specific question related to data. And so when we think about divorce statistics, marriage statistics, for example, I know many of us know in the divorce statistics area, there are 3 or 4 common ways that gets measured. CDC has a way, Census Bureau has a way they're different. Bowling Green, I think, has adjusted marriage rate, which is still yet different.
Yep.
But if you were going to pick one statistic, and fortunately we don't have to, but if you were going to look at one outcome that might give us the clearest picture of thriving, I'd be curious how you navigate that. And in particular, I'm thinking from Melissa Kearney's book, which you mentioned. I know she talks about how children are impacted more by young people not getting married than they are divorced. And so would children in married households versus non-married households, would the just married households against the whole population? If you had to pick one stat to say how's the U.S. doing or how's Arkansas doing, and we don't have to, but if you had to pick one, what would you pick?
Well, and I think even what you just described, just because they're growing up in a home with 2 married parents, doesn't mean that the home is healthy. So I don't know that you could do that. I haven't mentioned the Harvard Flourishing Project. But that has tenets of what thriving looks like. And so I do think actually looking at, I know Baylor is coming out. So Baylor and Harvard are working together, and they are coming out with some new data very soon on thriving. And I think paying attention to that, because they very specifically talk about marriage, about involved parents, about church, community involvement. They have this whole list of things that they're paying attention to, and they are definitely seeing, okay, people who are doing these things tend to do better, seem to be thriving, aren't experiencing the loneliness that others are experiencing. And that's globally, which I think gives us a lot of meat to speak about. So I would for sure pay attention to what's coming out from there. And gosh, I'm hesitant. I haven't found that there's a single source that speaks to that. I think there's multiple sources that we have to pay attention to. And certainly we know that the vertical relationship with the Lord is foundational. And there are some people who can hear that, and others that they're just not ready to hear that yet. And so being able to have the opportunity to speak across the board, both secularly and sacred, about what we know to be true in terms of building healthy marriages and families. All the resources that I spoke of earlier are things that I pay attention to all the time. So
Thank you.
anybody who wants to, I mean, Dennis, Carl, John Conger, any of y'all, Amy, if you want to add to that, Curt, I know there's a lot of experts on this call, so y'all just feel free to jump right in.
I think what I say, Ray, is your question is a little bit an unfair question. And what I mean by that is we are making different arguments at different times
Right.
to different people to try to accomplish different things.
Yeah.
And so the nice thing about it, and Julie mentioned that when she got started in this, there wasn't a lot of data. We now at the point, we have so much data. And so I think it's really a matter of understanding really what's the argument that you're trying to make.
Yeah.
And what's the case you're trying to prove? And so and then make sure that you've got that argument. So Ray, for example, you said, hey, if we're trying to, for example, if you're putting together an HMI grant to try to drive down divorce rates, then you'll want to be looking at how does this state of Arkansas compare against nationwide or compare against other states. Well, as far as I know, there's only one place that does that statewide comparison, and that's the CDC statistics. So we'll use CDC statistics for that. And so it's really a matter of understanding what's the case you're trying to make, and use this stat for that. So,
yeah.
And I would just make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Make sure that you're doing a good job with that, because we've definitely seen through the years people comparing apples to oranges, and that it doesn't help the cause for sure. So yeah, thank you for that, Dennis. Tom, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was just curious, maybe talk a little bit about what you're doing now and your involvement. I'd be interested in hearing.
So I left, first things first, 4 years ago, and went to the WinShape Foundation as the Senior Director of WinShape Marriage. So for the last 4 years, I have been working to build that ministry. When I came there, we saw about 762 couples annually at retreats. And this past year, we saw over 3,000 couples. Which I think speaks to people are hungry. People are very hungry for information to help them have a thriving, flourishing marriage. And it's definitely up to us to figure out how to get them to come. And I think I've for sure learned experiences speak to people. They don't want to be lectured at, they want to be engaged with. So the more we can create opportunity for them to experience something and learn through the process, it's powerful. And I mean, we're engaging more of the senses, so we know that's a good thing. So I've been spending a lot of time working on that, creating resources and pushing out content really for anybody to use when it comes to building strong marriages and families. Wind-Shaped Marriage has a podcast, and so there's a lot of us that have had conversation on there. And then we've also interviewed a lot of other experts who are working in the field. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years. And now I am really spending my time speaking and teaching and pouring into community marriage initiatives to help people be successful across the country. I feel very called and passionate to helping folks doing the work to be
Are there
successful.
resources we can access in our organization from what you guys are doing that would be helpful?
I mean, there's tons of stuff on the Wind-Shaped Marriage website that you can find, and the podcast is on YouTube. There's a lot of resources. Yes. Brooke, did you have a question?
Just trying to find what you were just mentioning. Oh, there it is, Steph. Thank you, Steph. I was hearing something different than you were saying, but my question was, I think that was it. I was trying to look up also what you were doing before First Things First, and I didn't see you on there. So I was like, is this a different one? But you're just not on that.
Firstthings.org. Yeah, firstthings.org. They have a lot of great content as well. And push out. What I like about what First Things First is doing is they're paying attention, and I mean, they're engaging with a lot of people, pushing out content, but not necessarily their own content. They're seeing people who are pushing out good content. They're asking for permission to push out that content, and they're collaborative. And I love that. I mean, a lot of us, we don't have content creators on our teams. And so we're reliant on what's out there. And I would just say, again, make sure that it's a credible source, but there's a lot of really, really good things out there that you can share with your folks that you don't necessarily have to create, but this is good, this is credible, and this is helpful to people. So
thank you.
You bet. Other questions or comments? I would just tell you that I have done this for a long time, and I think there are people on the call that would concur with me that this is not for the faint of heart. But if you're called to it, over time, you do see you are making a difference. And it may not be a bajillion people, but you just think about the impact, the ripple effect of just a few families who you have poured into, and they've learned how to do it well generationally. That's going to impact people for years to come. And so I think we cannot get disheartened about the work. It's such important work. Right before I left First Things First, I was picking up some product from a distributor in town, and this guy said, "Oh, you work for First Things First?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Man, I wish everybody knew about First Things First." And I said, "Well, how do you know about First Things First?" And he said, "Oh, well, my wife and I went to our pastor and said, we're getting divorced, period. End of discussion. We have tried everything and it is not working and we're done. And our pastor said, I'm not going to argue with you, but I am going to ask you to go to an experience that First Things First offers for couples who are in distress. And I'm just saying, just for me, I'd like you to do that. And then come back and have a conversation with me. He came to the experience and he said, we actually came with our divorce papers in hand and were angry that we were wasting our time at this experience. And he said, at the end of the experience, we tore up our divorce papers and threw them in the garbage can as we left the experience. And the way he was talking about it, I thought it must have happened like 2 weeks ago. So I said to him, how long ago did you do this? And he said, 6 years ago. I was like, oh, okay, well, what was going on 6 years ago? And he said, well, we have 7 children and they currently range in age from 18 to 30. And I said, oh, well, you had a lot of life going on for sure 7 years ago. And he said, yeah. And he goes, now, he said, our youngest is getting ready to graduate from high school. And he said, I often think about how their life would be very different had our pastor not been very insistent about us going to the experience. So there's 7 kids that are having a very different life as a result of that experience. And you just don't know. So we have to keep on keeping on because you just don't know how God's using you. And I will say, this right here is so incredibly important. Getting on the phone and talking to each other. What do you know? Who can I call? Who could come do a date night? Who can give me this information? I mean, like there's collective on this call, lots of wisdom in the marriage realm. And so I would just say, don't be out there trying to do it by yourself. The whole point of having the marriage initiative is that we're better together, way better together, especially when you get discouraged. You can call and have conversation with someone who can say, man, one foot in front of the other. Today is today and tomorrow is tomorrow. So keep on keeping on. So that would be my word of encouragement as leaders in the marriage realm. Be that trusted voice and know that John 10:10 is true. The Lord came so that we could live an abundant life, and we have the opportunity to help people engage in that and to know you don't have to keep on doing what you've been doing. You can do something different. So,
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Dennis did share 2 links in the chat that he would like everyone to check out. He says, I would encourage you to consider number 1, the policy recommendations, and he shared a link there.
Yes.
Number 2 is a 30-second form you can fill out to show your support.
Yeah, so if I take a minute to talk about that. So I think it was last week, Richard Albertson led a family policy briefing at the state capitol in Florida. And Richard and his team did a phenomenal job of organizing it. Yeah, Julie's holding it up. Yeah. And we had several out of town, out of state authors come in. JP DeGance was there. Brad Wilcox was there. Ian was there. Researcher from FSU. They did a wonderful job, and Richard did a wonderful job of organizing these policy recommendations for Florida. And what he's asking is that the 2 links is the first one shows what it is you'd be supporting, and the second is just it takes like 30 seconds to fill out. You put in your name, the name of the organization, email address, and it says we support that. Why that's important is we want all the states to, over time, move there. Right now, our only funding is $75 million for the marriage work is $75 million a year from a federal grant. Well, in Florida, a few years ago, they passed a thing for $70 million a year for fatherhood, just in one state. If we could get all the states to provide that kind of funding in the marriage thing, then this work of community marriage initiatives would just really take off. So encourage you to take the 30 seconds to fill out the form. And if you'd like to see what it is you're saying you're supporting, click on the first link. Thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
Julie, I don't know if am I live there? Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things that as we were talking about the research based, as well as the idea of how easy it is to get worn out. I mean, we're new into the CMI world, but we've been doing the marriage thing for decades now. And one of the things to keep in mind as you're doing the research is remembering that there's a lot of other stuff that you're doing. You're leading a team, you're staffing, you're programming, you're counseling, you're doing all of these other things. And so it's like, where do we find time to get this research? And so some of these clearinghouses are a great place to do it. But at the same time, getting as much information as you can, because when you present, you need to have more under the table, as you said, than what you're presenting. So don't just think if we can run at it with a bunch of statistics, we're in a good shape. But at the same time, with that as well, and it's a lot that we're doing, and it is the long haul that it's going to make a difference. Your story was great, Julie, and I think that sense of the long haul, that it's easy to get discouraged day by day, but keeping that vision in mind is the way to go. So,
yes, yeah. Thank you for that. Agreed. All right. Anybody else? Well, thank you for the opportunity. And if I can be helpful or answer any questions, like if something comes up later and you think of anything, just let me know. Happy to help.
Thank you so much, Julie. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to share with us today. It was outstanding, and we're so grateful for you.
Thank you. I'm grateful for all of y'all. And I'm praying as we keep going that we just remember that we're better together.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
That concludes our February training event, guys. And remember, if you need anything at all, you can reach out to me at steph@marriageinitiative.org. I will be sharing many of the resources that we talked about at the beginning of the call. I'll get those links from Julie and we'll be sharing those with you. So be on the lookout for my follow-up email next week. That will include the link to this training event as well as the links that she mentioned earlier. So be on the lookout for that email. We love you guys, and we're so grateful that you're part of the CMI family. We're so grateful that you're in this work. And you're all doing amazing things. We love you guys so much.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Great job. Thank you.
Thanks.